Welcome to another episode of Get Real. I'm your host, Tom Lemons, here with Joe Pulio. He's a former captain with United Airlines and a pilot examiner with over 6,000 examinations over 26 years. So he's got a lot of experience in the airline industry. And I've got him here with me today. How you doing, Joe?
Good, Tom. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today is not going to make a lot of people happy, because he's going to talk about some issues he believes are going to cause problems. It's caused some problems recently, but it may actually be not so safe to fly right now. And he's going to explain some of those things that's going on. And a lot of it does have to do with, which we hear a lot about, the DEI, which thankfully that's been squashed by the current administration.
Yes, it has.
And so we're going to touch on some of that.
Absolutely.
So, Joe, tell our audience a little bit about you, more than I just did.
Well, let's see. I started flying when I was 14 years old. Got all the instructor ratings in both airplanes and helicopters. As you know, I was a New York City police officer, assigned to the aviation unit, flying helicopters for them. And then I got fortunate enough to get a part-time job flying corporate jets out of White Plains, New York. And I got hired on at United Airlines and ended up flying captain for them, type rated in the 75, 76, 737. 1998, became a pilot examiner for the FAA. Done over 6,000 certification rides for the FAA, both in airplanes and helicopters. And so I've got a pretty good background to give a little insight as to what's transpiring these days.
So whatever you tell us today, you can pretty much count on it being as accurate as possible.
As accurate as possible,
right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and a lot of people may remember you from last year or the last election when you ran for sheriff in Hernando County.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And we don't have to get into too much, but, everyone's curious, is Joe going to run again? So we can talk about it if you want to. You don't have to, but we can talk about that a little later. So,
sure. Absolutely.
But go ahead and so one of the things when I talked to you before, you were saying one of the biggest concerns you have right now with the is really with the pilots and either the training or what the requirements are to get into the pilot seat right now in a commercial airline with hundreds of lives at risk. Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if you compare in the early 1990s, pilot hiring then, I think about 1 in 800 got hired at a major airline.
Wow.
Most of the people getting hired back then had 3,000 to 4,000 hours. And now we fast forward to recent times and the world economy just booming, and a lot of these third world countries are booming as well. So there's been a tremendous demand in aviation, and a demand that is very difficult to keep up with. And as a result of trying to keep up with that, they'd have to, the airline industry has to dig deeper to fill those cockpits and generate the revenue, because that's what they did. They do is to ensure revenue and returns for the shareholders. And those actions have consequences. Right. Everything you do, there's either a positive or a negative, or maybe a little bit of both. And that's the same thing in the airline industry.
Okay. So you had said something about before you would take at least 4,000 to 5,000 hours to get into that seat.
Right.
And now you're saying it's just 1,500?
1,500 hours. That's correct.
Wow.
And again, that's just due to the expansion that has taken place.
Okay. So it's really just the need for
Right.
pilots.
Right.
And I know that it used to be a main requirement to have a bachelor's degree as well, right?
It did, yes.
Okay, but not so much now.
Not so much now, but quite honestly, a bachelor's degree showed commitment, that you were able to stick with something and see it through to the end. Times change, and I don't think that's the tell-all with a person's work ethics today. So I don't think really having a degree or not having a degree really matters much.
Well, not to get off on a tangent, but a degree today, going to college today or universities, is more of an indoctrination. So, I mean, you're really, that's, like I said, it's on a different topic altogether. But yeah, I don't know that Going to college is really, does it have the same, effect as it used to?
It doesn't.
It's not the same anymore,
as
is
we
it?
know, it might have
Right.
a very adverse effect too.
Right.
So do you even want to be in that environment?
Right. Well, like I said, we'll save that for another day. But anyways, but yeah, back to the pilots. Now, one of the things, like I said, we've heard this term a lot, the DEI, right? And that is, hiring people not based on their merits,
Right.
not based on their experience, but based on either their color or their whatever minority or what they call it, marginalized, citizen. So women, it's again, this is not. Let me preface this with a statement. It's not that, and I'm sure you agree with me. It's not that there should not be more women and more people of color in the pilot seat. Nothing. It's not about that. But certain people will twist it into being that way when you talk about this. But it's not about that. It's about the experience. It's about getting the same experience as any other person would have to go through.
Right.
And you shouldn't be getting in the pilot seat just based on your color, your race, your religion, or your sexual orientation.
Right.
So, and I know you're behind that as well, right?
Yeah. I, as you know, I was a new pilot supervisor for the airline that I worked for. And I had oversight of 800 new hires in Chicago. And I sat on interviews, hired and turned down applicants and terminated applicants and saw applicants through all the way through their probationary period. What color you are, the gender, really didn't have anything to do with it. It was, can you hack it in the cockpit? Can we get you through the training program and generating revenue at the end of that program? So if you make it simple, I have $100,000. I'm going to hire one of 4 people today. Who am I going to invest that $100,000 in that will get through that program, get out the door, and generate revenue safely for the airline? That's what we're looking at. Back then,
Right.
Today that's changed quite a bit.
When do you think that changed? Was this because of an administration?
Well, it was certainly an administration, but Tom, if you think back in time, you always heard those type of things were going on.
Yeah. Even back as far as the Obama administration. This really when it began.
And probably before that too.
Right.
And by the way, I've flown with people from all over the world,
Right.
of all sexes and colors and nationalities. And I've flown with some great pilots, and I've flown with some very weak pilots across the board. But to me, it's a little bit unfair to basically write off a whole group of people and just open up a pathway for others to get in.
So basically you're saying, just like we explained, it should be based on their merits, their experience,
Right.
their training. You shouldn't lower the standards to become a pilot, right? But they were doing that.
Not in the testing standards,
Okay.
but in the hiring standards at some of the airlines, they were doing that. Yes.
Okay.
And I think it might still be going on today.
Okay. But you do believe, as again, when I preface this topic, you do believe that they've hired people who were not really qualified or less qualified than another candidate, but based on their color, sex, religion, whatever.
Well, let's say less experienced
Okay.
than other candidates. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, then
As a matter of fact, the CEO of United Airlines publicly
admitted that.
and stated that we are going to hire this category of people aggressively and make it 50% of what we're hiring, and they reached goals of 80%.
So that's interesting. In a recent video that actually you sent it to me, Matt Walsh, who's a popular podcaster, he put a clip in there of an interview it was an HBO interview with Scott Kirby, who is the CEO of United Airlines,
Right.
where he's glorifying the fact that he has committed to hiring 50% women from this point forward as pilots. Now, again, it's not about hiring women. It's about choosing to, regardless of their experience or whether they're fit for the job,
Right.
that they're going to bypass someone who may be more experienced.
Right.
Is that what's happening?
Absolutely.
And here's the CEO of United making it clear how it really works. Listen.
How is diversity and diversity targets working into the Aviate Academy?
We have committed that 50% of the class of the classes will be women or people of color. Today, only 19% of our pilots at United Airlines are women or people of color. And by the way, from all the data I've seen, that's the highest of any airline in the country.
Well, that should put fear into anyone, like you had said, that anyone is planning on who has to frequently fly,
Right.
who flies a lot domestically at least, and that they may be getting a pilot who's not really that experienced.
I actually find myself driving more now.
You as a pilot, you
Yeah,
find yourself
I
driving
find myself
more.
driving
Right,
more.
right.
You know, it used to be that you can jump seat and sit up in the cockpit and kind of watch what goes on. But I cannot remember a time when I was at United of getting on any airline and being a little bit apprehensive. Can't remember a time.
You were, and for the most part, you felt secure. I've always felt secure on
Yes.
a plane that they've got our lives. They're going to handle this flight perfectly. I have nothing to worry about.
Right.
They're the most experienced people are in that seat.
Right.
And they've got the co-pilot. So if they work together, and there should be no problems.
Right.
And every flight I've ever taken, there's never been a problem. So but today that's changed, and unfortunately, it's due to politics.
It is due to politics, and it's having a profound result in what we're seeing. I mean, it's almost 2 or 3 times a week where there's an accident in general aviation,
Yeah.
or a mind-boggling incident, which could have been a tremendous tragedy in the airline industry.
Right.
And it falls back on experience, lack of situational awareness in what's going on around you, and a loss of the big picture.
Right.
And that's when things start to break down. Now, I have tested and flown with young pilots who I did basically all their exams, and today are flying Boeings around the world, and they are very competent individuals who had a great foundation to build from. I'm very proud of those guys that we even speak and joke around a couple of times a week now. So it's nice to go back in time and see them basically when they walked in the door at the flight school, and now they're sitting flying co-pilot on a 777 or a 76 for some of the majors.
That must make you feel really good to know to know that you trained that guy, and that he's got a career path that's going to, he could go on for years and years and have a great life.
We had good times there and produced some good pilots.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. And you're not one of those who
Good
deals
pilots?
with failure, right? Yeah, right. You're not gonna. What I'm saying is, you're not one of these. You're not like the United Airlines CEO. When it comes to training someone, you're training them, and if they don't pass something, they don't pass.
No.
You don't just push them through.
You had a responsibility as a pilot examiner, number one, to the taxpayer, to Congress, who has oversight of the FAA, and to hold those individuals to the standard. And it's kind of like being a policeman, because most of your interactions with law enforcement are negative.
Yeah.
Not the case with pilot examiners, but pilot examiners sometimes issue notices of disapproval, which could affect the person's career.
Right.
And you have to be the bearer of bad news. But in the long run, it's for the good of the individual and for the good of the industry, really.
What do you think the biggest issue is right now? I mean, if you could pick a certain, let's say you think someone is not that qualified, who should not be in that pilot seat, and if you could say, like, what is it, psychological issues? I know that you mentioned a test they have to vigorously
the
tested.
MMPI. Basically,
Okay.
it's the same exam that law enforcement officers take, a psychological.
Right.
The same thing that pilots take.
Okay.
I took 2 in law enforcement, 1 for the airlines.
Did you pass?
I did.
That's great. But so it's vigorous. It's not.
No, we're not. I don't think we're seeing psychological issues.
Okay.
Although there was that horrific incident
Alps.
in the Alps with
Oh my gosh, that was horrible.
German wings.
But that's you can't ever see that coming. You can. I mean, I don't know. In that case, I think he did have some issues, and they.
He had some issues, but I guess their equivalent of HIPAA laws really prevented those issues from coming out. But you know what? Just like in law enforcement, those men and women are dealing with problems just like you and I are. Mm-hmm. And instead of putting a bad light on them, or they're afraid that they're going to lose their job, that should be the furthest thing from their mind. And whatever industry you're in, whether it's the airline industry or in law enforcement, you should coalesce around that individual and help them get better.
Right. Right.
But we're not really seeing that.
That's not the
in
issues
airline
really
industry.
you're seeing. It's,
No.
it's more of just not experience or less training.
Right.
And need more training.
And
Yeah.
what's happening is, getting back to the growth in the industry, it's very difficult to meet that demand on everybody. Mm-hmm. And not only the pilots, Boeing, mechanics, air traffic control, obviously, as we've seen, although that was a little bit self-inflicted there. But it is demanding to keep up with the demand and to fill those cockpits. So
You've mentioned a few areas. Like you said, ATC is those guys, girls and guys are. I mean, that's got to be a stressful job. That's what I've heard is one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. And there's not enough qualified people to fill those positions. And as we've seen in Newark, the infrastructure was a disaster.
yeah, it's antiquated.
Yeah.
And you know, Tom, every crash is a chain of events. And if you break one of the links in the chain, the crash wouldn't happen. The thing is to mitigate risk and realize what's happening, not only right now, but a couple of miles down the road or a couple of minutes down the road.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine. You know, I'm sure that's what the training's about, right? You learn your checklist. You learn to be calm when a problem arises, right? I mean, that's probably one of the biggest. I don't see how these guys, some of these pilots, can even stay calm in a situation where it ultimately could end in disaster.
Yeah.
And
well, you're so focused on working at the task at hand to resolve the task at hand that you really don't have time to be nervous.
okay.
And
those lives are in your hands.
you know,
You know.
it took me just about 8 years to upgrade to captain at United. But I had flown first officer on the 7.3, the 727, the 757, and the 767. And then I upgraded to captain on the 7.3. Plus I had been in management. So I was really comfortable with several thousand hours in the Boeings at that point to get into the left seat. And I'll never forget my line check airman. We flew a Tampa trip because we both lived here. So we laid over here at home. And you get 25 hours with the check airman.
Okay.
So he's checking me out as a captain. And we get to Chicago. So we flew the same trip pretty much every week.
The check airman, just so people understand, is he flies in the jump seat?
No, he's a captain
Okay.
that is able to fly in both seats.
Okay.
And he is doing the FAA regulatory requirement before the company cuts you loose as the captain.
Okay.
You have to go out and do X amount of hours and X amount of landings.
Okay.
So I had achieved the time and landings, and we'd got to Chicago, and we had a 3-hour sit. So we're kind of relaxing, and he goes over to the computer and signs me off to solo, unbeknownst to me.
Oh, wow.
And gets what's called the field standby co-pilot and says, hey, you're going to fly the rest of the trip. So Jeff had come over to me and said, Joe, I'm going to cut you loose to solo, so you're going to go to Sacramento yourself. you'll have the field standby first officer.
Yeah.
And the highlight of your career, as a child, you want to be a captain at a major airline.
Suddenly you're a
and
captain.
Here you are.
You're like, wow.
And I could remember when they told me to taxi into position and hold back then, getting on the runway and looking down the runway with 140 people sitting in the airplane and saying, Lord, give me the strength to make the right decisions. Because it's not only me, but you as well. And it almost felt like the first day that I soloed an airplane as a kid. Wow. And then I remember getting airborne saying, well, we're airborne now, and we're either going to make it or we're not.
Wow. So what an accomplishment. But yeah, so let's talk real quick about some of the incidents. That, we brought it up earlier. Specifically, the one in Toronto, the one at Dulles,
Right.
in D.C., and touch on some of that. I know that was a hard landing, the one in Toronto, that caused that plane to flip over. And now, do you believe, like you said, everything's a chain of events.
Right.
Who do you think was ultimately to blame for that failure?
They were up against some pretty demanding conditions, but that's what airline pilots get paid a lot of money to do. But if you don't have the proficiency or the situational awareness to be in that position, then it's going to get ugly, and it could get ugly relatively quickly. I believe the first officer was flying the airplane. From what I understand, the captain had 7 years experience,
Okay.
but he either was a simulator instructor or not really on the line that much. And now you put them in a situation where they have a crosswind, which is probably reaching the operational performance limits of the airplane.
It was like 40 knots or something.
40 knots, gusty day, blowing snow. Not snowing, but blowing snow from a previous snowfall. And when you look at that video, where it's taken from a cockpit where they are passing from left to right, you can see that the rate of descent and the impact, there was never a flare.
Came down too hard.
They just drove the airplane right down into the ground, and the main went through the wing, ignited the fuel tank, rolled the airplane over, and there you have it. And
Thankfully, there were no casualties in that one, was there?
there were not, miraculously, no. But the airplane was calling out certain things which should have initiated a go-around. Sink rate.
Really?
Yeah, there was approximately about, I think, 1,200 feet a minute rate of descent in the last 500 feet, which we're supposed to go around. Why that go around didn't take place, I don't know. And I don't believe the final report is out yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, aren't there, I know a little bit about this, not a lot, but aren't there lights on either side of the runway when you're approaching that they're like white and red, and they tell you, tell you if you're at the right height?
It's a PAPI.
Okay.
But
Can you
that-
explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it basically you're looking at those lights, and red over white. If they're too red over white, it means that you're on the glide path.
Okay.
That wasn't the issue there. You could be on the glide path but still be unstable.
Descending too fast.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the rate of descent could have been, like you said, 1,200 foot of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they never flared and never initiated a go around.
Okay. Now, how about the Dulles flight? Now, I know you have some thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
And tell me what.
Well, flying
Has that report come out yet? I'm not
that's
sure.
not finalized
Okay.
either. No.
Your
But,
thoughts on that, though?
So remember I said earlier, chain of events, and if we could break one link in those chain, the accident probably wouldn't happen. So they're on a visual approach. The jet is to runway 1 at Reagan Airport, which is demanding in and of itself getting in and out of there. It's not the biggest airport,
Yeah.
and you've got
Not a
the
long
White
runway, is
House
it?
and a lot going on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you throw in a air traffic controller who is by himself, working 2 separate frequencies. And now you throw in a third aircraft, a second aircraft. There's the third chain in that link. And to make matters worse, we're going to have the controller talking to both these aircraft on 2 different frequencies.
Because one is military and one is.
is civilian.
Commercial, civilian, yeah.
So what happens is, as pilots, we're losing 50% of the conversation.
Right.
And that not hearing that is a loss of situational awareness. So what should be happening is when you realize that I've got these constraints against me, that's when your attention level should go up. So you should be listening a little bit harder and trying to understand, fill in what that other conversation is. And I believe there was some conversation between the controller and the helicopter verifying that that the helicopter had sight of the jet, which, by the way, they asked to land on another runway,
Right. Change,
which
yeah.
brought the airplane into the flight path of the helicopter. So had they stayed on runway 1, that helicopter was running up the east side of the river. I've been in there many times.
Right.
And there would have never been a conflict. But because
Might have been a close call, but
no, not
Really?
even,
wow.
not even. You would have got what's called a TCAS advisory, but you wouldn't have gotten what's called a resolution advisory to respond to it.
Okay.
But as long as the helicopter remains where he or she should be,
Which she was too high.
slightly,
300 feet, I think it was.
I think 100 feet higher than what she would have been. But when you're talking about 100 feet, you shouldn't even be there.
Yeah.
The two of them should not be there.
Yeah.
And the helicopter does have the option of stopping, going to a hover, doing a 360, remaining north of the final approach course of the airliner until the airliner got in. And it was just a breakdown in communication. And then you have the result of, I think, 61 or 67 people
Yeah.
lost their lives.
All
that day.
perished. Yeah. What a horrible tragedy that was. Oh, and a lot of them were the ice skating team.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
Young girls that was in this team. Oh, what an awful tragedy. I mean, sometimes these things, I know, like you said, everything's a chain of events. And this just is how this worked out. But I mean, for two aircraft to just run into each other, that's very, very rare anyways in the sky. Right? So
This episode of Get Real is brought to you by Tri-Peak Roofing, your Hernando County roofer.
So, Joe, a couple of questions before we close out this. The airline industry. Do you still think we have the safest airlines in the United States than any other country in the world at this point?
Absolutely.
But do you think it's going downhill?
I think a correction needs to be made. I think that, frankly, the FAA has a little bit lost its way. The Boeing MAX issue was an absolute black eye for the FAA and for Boeing.
Yeah.
And it's taken Boeing quite some time to bounce back. Look, when you're designated to do work on behalf of the FAA, whether it's pilot certification or aircraft certification, because they do that too on that side of the house, that's a huge responsibility. You're going to affect people's lives, families, and so on, and the bottom line of the company. And the FAA, unfortunately, is losing sight of that. They are looking to, on the pilot training end of it and testing, which is actually a little bit scary, they're looking to give testing authority to schools. And what does that mean, Tom? It means that people like myself, designated pilot examiners who do the testing on behalf of the FAA, only report to the FAA. But they want to give that testing authority to a flight school. So your objective in running a flight school is success.
Right.
So you're going to allow basically them to issue pilot certificates. So the notice of disapproval or failure rate will be much less than what designated pilot examiners are doing, because a designated pilot examiner functions on behalf of the administrator, the FAA.
And your
For the
oversight is
purpose
the
of
FAA.
the FAA
And there's
director.
no oversight if you just have these
Right.
private companies. They can say whatever they want, right?
Yes, and their job is to put pilots through and get more revenue. So the flying public needs to be aware of that. And if you're uncomfortable with that, I would encourage you to write your congressman. because most people are not aware that these government agencies, the FAA and so on, under almost the cover of darkness and at night, change regulations or get things passed in their favor, which have a profound effect on you, the stakeholder. And to me, pilot certification, aircraft certification, is something where they have to be more hands-on. As a matter of fact, it used to be that the FAA, if you were going to give examining authority, which is what it's called, to a flight school, the FAA would say, hey, Joe, we're going to do the check rides here because they're trying to achieve this, but we need to ensure that the training is meeting our standards and the certification is. So we're going to do all the exams for X amount of tests here.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. FAA. Well, guess what the FAA just turned around and did? We don't have the resources to do that. So no longer does an FAA inspector have to tie himself up and observe all those exams. That's going to rear its ugly head somewhere down the road, and some poor person is going to be a statistic based on those decisions.
And we're just at the beginning of this.
You're just at the beginning. They're trying to push this from September. And here's the scary part. The people within the FAA pushing this are maintenance people. They're not pilots.
That's what you said before, that
Yeah,
a lot of them are not even pilots.
One of them has a private pilot certificate, which had a medical back in the early 90s, tells me he hasn't flown an airplane in 28 years. But these are the people pushing that for pilot certification.
Why is that? What is the incentive for them to do that? Why are they lowering this across the board? Why are they lowering the standards to put pilots in these airlines?
I think number one, it's a certain degree of short-sightedness and just not knowing, because they've never done what we do.
Okay.
For the most part.
You don't think there's an ulterior motive here, politically or something else? Job security? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I think that for the most part, look, right now it's hard to get exams. Very difficult. You could finish your training and wait 2 to 3 months to get a practical test, which is cumbersome on the individual. So I think what they're trying to do is find a solution to that quickly, but the solution is not the right one. And it's not the right people making the decision. So if you're uncomfortable with that, I suggest you get a hold of your congressman and let them know, because you are the people sitting behind these cockpits, and you have a right to know.
And Joe knows.
Joe drives.
Joe.
I-95 northbound.
He prefers to drive now. So, this is scary.
But again, there are a tremendous amount of excellent airmen out there, both men and women, people of color. There are.
Yes.
But we don't need one accident.
No.
We don't need it.
Not because we hired someone based on skin color or gender.
No.
That's just...
No, we don't need it.
We don't need that. I wouldn't care if we had 100% female pilots. It's not about that. Like I said, we just need pilots who know how to fly, have control of the plane. I mean, you've got all these lives in your hands. I don't think a lot of people have heard kind of the information you've put out there today. I know there has been some recent concerns because there's incidents, even ground incidents. I mean, you're seeing planes bump into other planes, taxiing to the gate. I mean, this is just every week. It's something.
It's not only on the pilot end of it. I mean, we've seen the videos of airliners taking off out of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And the landing gear, the wheel coming off, and the gear is as big as us.
Yes.
And ends up through somebody's car in a parking lot somewhere.
Wow. Yeah. This, and again, that goes back to also the who's taking care of the mechanics. Who are doing the repairs? Who's doing the manufacturing? We can always get into that later. We're going to actually do another. This is a series, just by the way. I want to bring Joe back again, and we're going to talk about other issues in the airlines. But this one was our first segment on the current condition with the airlines here in the United States, and we're going to have him back again to talk about it. There's one other thing I want to talk to you about right now, though, off the topic of airlines, and that is the election and who's running for sheriff coming up. Now, I know Commissioner Steve Champion, has said, look, he's sick and tired of the way the sheriff's office in Hernando County is being the leadership there. and he's tired of it. He's tired of the irresponsibility, both financially and with how he runs the department, and he's possibly going to throw his hat in there. But what about you, Joe? First of all, are you still considering it another run? But you also had something to say about that and some message to Steve.
Yeah, my wife and I haven't made that decision yet, and we really don't know who the players are going to be in this equation. Quite frankly, I would be surprised if our current sheriff goes the 4 years. Who would fill his shoes in the interim? I think we'll know relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Because time does go fast. Now, as far as Steve is concerned, I like Steve very much. He is an excellent person. He's a truly a caring individual. His heart is in the right place for the people, no doubt. And quite frankly, he has stuck his neck way out there for the guillotine to come down on.
Oh, yeah.
You got to love a guy like that. You got to give him a lot of credit.
You know what he gets from that, though? He gets 70% of the vote
He
to
does.
keep him in
Yeah.
that position.
And
Yeah.
gee, if everybody would do the right thing like Steve is doing, I guess we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. Exactly.
But that being said, again, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Steve. I think Steve's would best serve us as our congressman. I think that we should put together a good core group of people with the community's consent. And please, folks, get out to vote no matter what the circumstances are. I think I lost the election by 6,000 votes, which was probably the closest
Right.
in quite some time.
Yeah.
But they have that down to a science.
Right.
And you need to get out and vote. And you need to understand where we are in the election cycle and which elections are not going to be on the ballot in November because, the election is now.
Right.
People don't quite understand that. I don't run into a person who says to me, you lost in November. No, I didn't. I lost in August because you didn't know that
That's
the election
right.
wasn't then.
And primaries are always more difficult anyway. But yeah.
But I would like to see Steve be our next congressman. I think that if we can get him to Washington, that he would better suit us there. And I think, and I'm not to come off selfishly, okay? But I think the CEO or the head of the sheriff's office needs to be a law enforcement officer. Because the men and women, you need to have walked in their shoes and truly understand it. And then there'll always be the perception that you're yielding to others to make those important decisions, which Steve is very focused, well accomplished, but I truly believe that Steve would be better suited there, and I would certainly throw my support behind him for that and do whatever boots on the ground,
Right.
as I like to say, what we need to do to make that happen.
Right. Well, whatever Steve decides to run for, I think he would succeed at it.
Oh,
I mean,
there's no doubt.
if he ran for Congress,
Yeah.
I believe he would be in there.
Yeah,
I believe he would.
there's no doubt.
Absolutely.
And you need somebody with his tenacity, outspokenness, and not afraid to hang his hide out there.
He would probably be one of those always on TV.
Oh, yeah, yeah, on
he
Fox
would be.
News, yeah.
He'd be one of the most outspoken ones.
no
for
doubt.
sure. Yeah. So then and you're still up in the air on whether you want to run for sheriff again.
It's truly this is a family decision. Listen, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I made mistakes then, but as you well know, we're up against a political machine
Yeah.
that, quite frankly,
With a
does
lot
a-
of money behind him.
And let's give Blaze credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
He does a good job at it. Probably because he's from Queens, but he does a good job at it. You got to say hats off to him for that.
Yeah.
But if you want to affect change, you got to get out and vote. We don't want to read about people's heartache over what the current officials are doing when you didn't
When you didn't go out and
participate in
vote.
the election.
22%, I think, was all it was. It
It
came
was
out and vote
horrible.
for the primary. It was
horrible.
awful. It was awful.
But like I said, I accept some responsibility for that too. I had a plan of not allowing them to put in a write-in candidate and doing their thing.
Yeah.
So that could have went either way. But
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and you learn by your mistakes.
Well,
But
and
my wife and I will make that decision when
Right.
and if the time comes.
that's right. That's right. It's a family decision, like you
It
said.
really is, because I tell you,
She's got to put up with a lot.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, no doubt.
there's a lot of hours to go into that. I mean, you spent a lot of time, even though you didn't get into the race till later. You know, but it was still it's every day. You've got to be involved.
That and I always said that I will jump in, answer calls for service. I don't plan on being a 9 to 5 guy.
Yeah.
And it takes a special person, a special wife, a woman to get behind you, because truly that commitment
Yeah.
is a big commitment, and you better do the right thing for the community. And
Yeah, it's not a 9 to 5 job, right?
It's not.
Yeah,
No, it's not. And I'm sure I'll be getting phone calls from you at 1 o'clock in the morning. Hey, what's going on?
right, right. Hey, at least you'll answer.
I will answer. I will answer.
Right. But Joe, just one last thing, because this has been a hot topic all over the county for now, coming up on years and years, because our current sheriff he doesn't like transparency. Let's just be straight about it. He doesn't like transparency. He doesn't like body cameras, which almost every agency is working towards acquiring a program for their department. And he's just not going to have it. And so what's your thoughts on the body cameras?
Well, I think he's the last guy standing in the room to shut off the lights. I don't think there is an agency that I can think of in the Tampa Bay area who's not using them now. I think that that was my platform. That was a big thing with me. You know, had I been elected, we would have had body-worn cameras here now, just like they have in Citrus County.
Yeah, Citrus, boy, that David Vincent, he that's how he won, I believe, is just saying, we're going to bring transparency to this agency, and boom, he's got body cameras
It's,
now.
you need them. You need them to protect the deputies. You need them to ensure the public that you serve that you're doing the right thing, and people understand that mistakes are made. Law enforcement is not pretty. I said that during the campaign.
Yeah.
But I think if you're a straight shooter with the public,
Yeah.
they're going to support you.
And no one's perfect. Like you said, mistakes will be made.
No.
One's going to, I mean, we're all humans. So no one's going to, bash a deputy or law enforcement for making a mistake, okay?
Right.
I mean, yes, there'll be some accountability, but at least we'll know when those things happen, whatever needs to happen as a result of that mistake, or if it's an intentional issue, or if the deputy is being blamed for something that he didn't do.
Right.
So it's a protection, like you said, and this is the same mantra all the time. It's a protection for both the deputy and the citizen.
And 99.9% of them get up every day wanting to do the right thing for the community that they serve.
Yep.
They're human beings just like you and I are. You make mistakes. I made mistakes. You own up to it. Hopefully it's not a tremendous mistake. We're able to navigate it okay. And everybody get back to work. We learn from that and go. But what I wanted to do was make it part of that academy where that camera is with them from day one, the entire time that they're going through their training, so they could see themselves. And they did that in the airline industry for a short time.
Right.
Where cameras were in the simulator, and then we got to watch it, and then the video was discarded. But I did, I did that. You said that, and you learn from that. So when that body camera becomes part of your uniform, and you've spent 6 months living with it, the product when they get out of the academy would be much better.
Well, in 2025, I don't think there's an excuse for not having cameras.
No.
I mean, it's not even a money issue anymore. We've got plenty of federal funding, state funding available, and there's not a single chief law enforcement officer who should be saying, no, I don't want them. No. And they're out there. But Joe, that's all we've got time for today.
All righty.
But thank you so much for coming
You're
on.
very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
And again, just so you know, this is the first and maybe a 2 or 3 part series that we're going to be talking about the airline industry. And we're going to bring Joe back and maybe in a week or so. And so, but that's all we got time for today. And we'll see you next time on Get Real.